Solomon Perel was born into a Jewish family. His youth coincided with the heyday of Nazism, when Jews were being expelled from Germany. One day, when his family was attacked, Solomon was taking a bath and had to hide naked in a barrel outside. In the evening, he asked for some clothes to be brought to him so that he could return home, and they gave him a jacket with Nazi symbols. In this form, he came to his family. His sister was killed, and his father took his family to his homeland in Poland. They settled above a movie theater, and Solomon became friends with the cashier. She was a nice girl, and she really liked this handsome Jewish boy. One night, Solomon's brother David returned. He had been at the front and said that there was no point in even trying to fight back the Nazis. David was sure that this army could not be broken. After listening to his son, the father of the family decides to send his son Solomon and Isaac to the east. The boys were gathered and sent on their way. When the brothers were crossing the river, they were separated by a crowd and ended up in different boats. The boat in which Solomon was sailing crossed paths with another one, which was sailing from the opposite bank. They were told that the Red Army was on the other side. The Poles did not want to meet the Russians, so they jumped into the water and went to the bank where the fascists had entrenched themselves. The Jews had no choice. They swam to the Soviet soldiers. Sally waited a long time for his brother among the Russians, but Isaac never showed up. Solomon was sent to an orphanage, where he was made into a model pioneer. He rejected the religion of his people, tied a red tie and sang communist anthems with everyone else. Only one pioneer refused to be like everyone else. Zdeněk continued to fervently believe in God and considered everything Soviet to be evil. At the same time, he remained with the other pioneers. Solomon managed to become a Komsomol member, but one day the fascists showed up and they had to flee. On the way, they were shot at from an airplane. All the guys left on a truck, and Solomon stayed with the other refugees. When he spent the night in the forest, the Germans noticed him and dragged him to their camp. There were many Russian prisoners here. Most of them were not going to give up their ideals even in the face of death, but some threw away their documents so they would not be killed. Sally also tried to get rid of his documents, but then changed his mind and stuffed them into his underwear. He told the fascists that he was German and his name was Joseph Peters. He spoke German and Russian well, and the soldiers decided to leave him. They were kind and sympathetic when it came to their own. Among the prisoners was Stalin's son. Solomon confirmed this by talking to the soldiers. The Germans were happy because it meant the end of the war. Stalin would certainly capitulate if they captured his son. Sally was brought to the town and fed. Zdeněk was there too. He quickly renounced everything Soviet and lived well among the fascists. When he saw Solomon, he gave up his soldiers, saying that Sally was a Jew. But the Germans did not believe him, because thanks to this boy they captured Stalin's son. They tried to catch Zdeněk and order him to lie, but he ran away and was hit by a truck. After that, Solomon became part of the German army. They put a Nazi uniform on him and sent him to fight against the Bolsheviks. In all matters in his family, Sally skillfully lied. He said that his relatives were killed by the Bolsheviks and he had no one left. One day, Solomon passed through the village with other soldiers. Here he saw children hanging from a noose. They were killed for helping the Bolsheviks. Sally was forced to watch this. After all, his parents hoped that the communists would finish him off, so he must have liked the sight. After this incident, Solomon burned his documents issued at the orphanage. In the army, he met Robert Kellerman. He used to be an artist and turned out to be a very pleasant conversationalist. They had something in common that brought the two together. One day, Sally went into the barn to take a bath, away from view. He did not want his fellow soldiers to see that he was circumcised. Robert came there too. He wanted to touch Sally on different parts of his body. Solomon tried to escape, but in the process, Robert saw his secret. He did not report him. On the contrary, they became even closer friends. Robert also had a secret that he could not reveal to anyone. Soon after, they found themselves on the battlefield. Having driven the Russians from their positions, they came under sniper fire. Robert was killed. When the rest of the Germans fled, Sally decided to surrender to the Bolsheviks. He contacted them by radio and asked them not to shoot while he was getting to the Russian location. The Germans took advantage of this and went on the offensive. Solomon began to be considered a hero. The fascists decided that he deliberately forced the Russians to put out the fire. The war hero was noticed by the higher ranks. He was sent to study at an elite Nazi school because he had already shown himself in the war. Sally was even a little happy because among the soldiers he often could not go normally because of need. he had to hide his circumcised organ. On the way to school, Sally finally became a man. He was accompanied by an older woman, but when the lights were turned off, she became very attractive and desirable. At school, Solomon was forced to take an oath and swear allegiance to the Fuhrer. Here he found good friends and met a girl named Leni. All the boys looked at her, but Leni paid attention only to Solomon because he was a war hero. Sally studied well. He was even recognized as a true Aryan at one of the classes. When emotions, what evil times. After graduating, he worked at a factory, and one day the radio announced that the Nazis had been driven back by Soviet troops at Stalingrad. The boys were very upset by their defeat, and even sang a song to praise Germany. Sally sang and saluted Hitler along with everyone else. He started dating Leni, but their relationship had not yet crossed the line of kissing. Sally was afraid that Leni would see his organ and hand him over to the Nazis, although she admitted that she was ready to personally cut the throat of a Jew if she met one. Solomon decided to slightly correct his cut body part. He pulled the skin over the head and tied it with a thread, deciding that no one would guess that he was Jewish. Leni brought him to her home to introduce him to her mother. Here Solomon learned that Lena's father was killed at the front, which is why she hates Jews so much. All school children were to be examined by doctors regularly, but Sally managed to avoid a medical examination by saying he had a toothache. He was sent to the dentist to have the tooth extracted. Later, he felt pain in his groin. Looking into his pants, Solomon realized that tying his foreskin with a thread was a bad idea. It turned black and began to fester. The thread had to be removed, and the skin returned to its place. Leni wanted to be intimate with him, but Solomon was not going to take such a risk, so he refused her. During their walk, they wandered into an old Jewish cemetery. After that, Sally dreamed of his relatives, and he decided to find them. He went to the ghetto, but they did not let him in. You could go through this area by tram. Solomon went and tried to spot his relatives on the streets, but all he saw was pain, suffering, and death. Preparation for the army began at school. Solomon, along with everyone else, practiced punches on an effigy of a Jew. Relations with Leni were going well. From her mother, Sally learned that his girlfriend had decided to give the Fuhrer a child. She had conceived him with Solomon's friend, and then was going to give the child to Hitler. Returning to school, Sally attacked his friend, but Solomon was not allowed to beat him up. He was called to the police. Here they asked questions about his family again, and Sally tried to wriggle out of it, but this time he was cornered. The police were going to make an inquiry to his hometown to find out the history of his family. Only a miracle could save Solomon, and at that moment the city was attacked from the air. Sally was happy because he was now saved. However, his friend, who had given Leni a child, died during the bombing. Incessant battles with the Russians and Americans began. Many Germans died in them. Solomon realized that Germany would lose the war. In one of the battles, when they were surrounded by the Russians, Sally did not shoot at them. He escaped and headed to the Soviet troops to surrender. To avoid being killed, Solomon shouted in Russian that he was one of them. Once captured, he wriggled as best he could to save his life, but the Soviet officers did not stand on ceremony with him. There were concentration camp prisoners nearby. One of them was given a pistol and offered to shoot Sally, but the prisoner did not have time to do it. Itzhak appeared and recognized his younger brother. Itzhak said that he had spent all this time in the concentration camp, while Solomon saluted Hitler and learned to kill Jews. Their parents were killed a couple of weeks after their escape. Itzhak did not care what Solomon had been doing all these years. He was glad to see his brother. He forbade anyone to tell that Solomon had served as a fascist. Itzhak got his brother some concentration camp prisoner clothes, and together they went to the Americans. When it was all over, Solomon moved to Palestine and started a family there.